It wasn't glamorous. No lake view, no fancy cabins, no paved roads. Just 50 acres of forest, an old dirt trail cutting through the pines, and a clearing where I planned to build a small home someday. But I liked the quiet. And more importantly, I owned it outright. I purchased the land 10 years earlier while stationed at a nearby base. The deed was clean, taxes paid every year, and the county records clearly listed me as the sole owner. Then life happened. 2 years later, I was deployed overseas for a long assignment. What I didn't know was that during my absence, the area around my property exploded with development. A new luxury subdivision appeared practically overnight, and with it came the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. At first, none of that mattered to me. My land sat on the edge of their community, separated by a wooded slope. My parcel had been there long before the subdivision existed, and it was not part of their HOA boundaries. But to someone on the HOA board, that apparently didn't matter. Because while I was deployed halfway across the world, they decided my land was abandoned. And then they sold it. I found out the day I came home. After 18 months overseas, I finally had leave and decided to visit my property. I wanted to check the land, maybe start planning a cabin. But when I drove up the dirt road, something felt wrong. The forest was gone. Instead of trees, there were houses. Not one or two, dozens. Perfect rows of identical beige homes stretched across what used to be my land. Fresh lawns, paved streets, white fences, and a big decorative stone sign at the entrance that read, Cedar Ridge Estates, Private Community. I sat in my truck staring at it. My first thought was that I must be in the wrong place. But the GPS coordinates were correct. The old creek that ran along the edge of my property was still there. Which meant one thing. This subdivision had been built directly on top of my land. I walked into the HOA office the next morning. The place looked like a real estate showroom. Polished floors, glass desks, smiling receptionist. "Hi," I said. "I'm looking for whoever runs the HOA." A few minutes later, a woman in a sharp gray suit came out. Karen haircut, clipboard, permanent scowl. "I'm Linda Parker," she said. "HOA president. What can I help you with?" I placed my property deed on the desk. "I own the 50 acres where Cedar Ridge Estates is built." She glanced down at the paper for maybe half a second before pushing it back. "That land was declared abandoned," she said flatly. I blinked. "Declared by who?" "By the HOA board," she replied. "After multiple notices went unanswered. I was deployed overseas." She shrugged like that wasn't her problem. "We followed the legal process." "What legal process allows an HOA to sell land they don't own?" Linda leaned back in her chair. "The county allowed the transfer." "Then we'll go talk to the county." She smiled. "That won't be necessary. The land has already been sold to the developer. The houses are built and occupied. There's nothing you can do." Then she slid a document toward me. "If you'd like, we can offer you a settlement." I glanced down. $20,000. For 50 acres of land now holding a multi-million-dollar neighborhood. I laughed. And that's when she made her mistake. "You should take the offer," she said coldly. "Otherwise you'll just waste your time." I folded the paper slowly. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "you didn't just take land. You stole federal property." Her smile faded. "What? I bought that land while serving on active duty," I said. "And it was protected under the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act." Her eyes flickered for the first time. "You cannot seize, sell, or foreclose on property owned by deployed military personnel without a federal court order." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You didn't get one of those," I said. Linda stood up quickly. "This meeting is over." But the damage was done. Because the moment I walked out of that office, I made one phone call. 3 weeks later, things started getting interesting. A convoy of black SUVs rolled into Cedar Ridge Estates early on a Tuesday morning. Residents peeked through their windows as men in suits stepped out carrying folders. They weren't from the HOA. They were federal investigators, the Department of Justice, and they weren't alone. With them came representatives from the Department of Defense. Turns out when a deployed service member's property is illegally seized and sold, the federal government takes that very seriously. Very seriously. The investigation moved fast. The county records were pulled. The HOA's paperwork was examined. And the results were devastating. The HOA had never actually owned the land. They had filed a fraudulent abandonment claim through a cooperative county clerk who never verified the ownership. Then they transferred the land to a developer for a massive profit. The developer built 72 homes. Homes that technically sat on land that still legally belonged to me. Which meant something remarkable. The entire subdivision was built on stolen property. I got another call a week later. This time from a federal attorney. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you have several options." I listened carefully. Option 1 was simple. Accept a large settlement. The developer, the HOA, and the county were all willing to pay millions to make the problem disappear. But there was another option. One that made me smile. Because the property transfer violated federal protections, the attorney explained, the original sale can be voided. Meaning the land legally reverts to its original owner. Me, every house, every road, every yard, all of it, mine. I asked the obvious question. What happens to the people living there? He sighed. That becomes a civil matter between you and the developer. I thought about Linda Parker. About the smirk on her face when she tried to buy 50 acres for $20,000. And I made my decision. Let's repossess it. The news hit Cedar Ridge Estates like a bomb. Within days, legal notices appeared on every homeowner's door. Notice of federal property dispute. Residents flooded the HOA office demanding answers. But Linda Parker had disappeared. So had 2 other board members. Turns out when federal investigators start asking questions about fraud, people suddenly remember they have vacations scheduled. Meanwhile, the developer tried to negotiate. They offered me $5 million. Then 10. Then 15. But by that point, it wasn't just about money. It was about principle. They built an entire neighborhood on land they never owned. So the federal court issued a ruling. The original sale was invalid. Ownership reverted to me, all 50 acres, including everything built on it. The day the ruling became official, a military legal liaison met me at the entrance to Cedar Ridge Estates. Technically, the military wasn't seizing the neighborhood. But because the case involved a violation of federal protections for deployed personnel, they were assisting with enforcement. And the symbolism was perfect. When we drove through the gates, people stared. Word had spread. The man whose land they were living on had finally arrived. I parked outside the HOA office. Residents gathered nearby, whispering nervously. Then I walked inside. Linda Parker wasn't there, but the walls were covered with framed HOA rules. Lawn height restrictions, fence regulations, parking violations, pet limits, thousands of dollars in fines for tiny infractions. I took them all down, every frame. Then I replaced them with one sheet of paper. A single notice. Property owner notice. Cedar Ridge Estates is now privately owned land. All prior HOA authority is terminated effective immediately. Future property agreements will be negotiated directly with the landowner. Daniel Carter. Over the next few months, the situation slowly stabilized. I wasn't interested in throwing families out of their homes. Most of them were victims of the developer's fraud too. So I offered a fair solution. Each homeowner could purchase the land under their house directly from me at a reasonable price. No HOA, no ridiculous rules, just normal property ownership. Nearly everyone accepted. Within 6 months, most residents finally owned their homes properly. The developer, however, wasn't so lucky. Between lawsuits, federal fines, and civil damages, the company collapsed. The corrupt county clerk lost his job and faced criminal charges. And Linda Parker, she resurfaced eventually, but not as HOA president. She showed up in federal court, charged with fraud and conspiracy. A year later, Cedar Ridge looked very different. The HOA office became a small community center. The ridiculous rulebook disappeared. People painted their houses different colors. Kids built treehouses. Someone even parked a boat in their driveway without getting fined. And every time I drove through the neighborhood, residents waved. Because they knew something important. Their homes existed because I chose not to take them back. But sometimes, when I pass the old stone entrance sign, I still laugh.